Ashley, you are live.
Hi, great to be on the show. Thanks for having me on. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how to avoid certain dead ends in terms of conversations with theists. So, just for a really quick bit of background, I'm trans myself. Came out about a year ago, and as part of that, I also grew up Christian. But for the longest time, I kind of suppressed the being trans and just kind of tried to ignore it because I felt like, I can't do that because I'm Christian. So, eventually I started to realize that, this just wasn't true, this Christian belief that I'd been taught. Once I started to realize that, I was much more willing to pursue transitioning and thinking about that and coming out and that sort of thing. But to people around me, those two things kind of both happened at the same time, which means that whenever I have, or very often I should say, when I have tried to have a conversation with a theist about, the reasons I don't believe, it's usually brought back to, you do actually believe, really you do, but, you just reject it because you want to sin. So I'm curious if either of you have found any good way to kind of avoid that sort of thinking, or that sort of argument, because it's not really an argument, even if they're right.
In my experience, it usually comes to that when they feel like they're backed into a corner and there's like no other reasonable thing to say. It's like, well, Romans 1:20 says that you still believe. You must just be wanting to sin in your unrighteousness, and that's why you're denying God. There really isn't a good way to convince people that that's not true. Maybe like recommending Paul Gia's video on why Romans 1:20 is the worst verse to evangelize with. Because like you can basically say like, okay, well, you telling me that isn't going to be a sudden revelation for me that brings me back to God. So why don't you just pretend that that's not true? Because that's the way I see it. But I don't know. It's a difficult one to deal with.
Yeah. I also think.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Which you mentioned the video. Advice?
Oh, apologia. So it's like apologia, the Greek word. Like the name Paul with OGIA on the end. So if you go to YouTube,
can we get someone in chat to link that video specifically? I'm sure one of the mods could find it pretty quick. And if you're in the chat, Ashley, you can find that there.
The video is called "Never Use Romans 1:20 with Non-Believers."
All right, I'm sure I'll be able to find that.
Yeah. Okay. I think if I could add something to that, Ashley, I don't know how serious these relationships are to you or how important they are to you. I understand that for some people, when they get into these conversations, like their goal is maintaining their relationship. They want to maintain that relationship and they're willing to, not talk about certain topics, and they're willing to make concessions where they need to be like, look, the end of the day, I care more about our relationship than us coming to an agreement on this topic. So why don't we put this to rest? If that's a goal for you, that's totally valid and totally something you should do. You should set boundaries around that. On the flip side, if maintaining these relationships isn't super important to you, to be honest, if someone is going to assert that they know what's in my head better than me, and that me being myself, something I relate. I struggled for years. I tried everything to force myself to be a man. Didn't work. Didn't stick. If they're going to assert that I'm only trans because I want to sin and not because I have no other choice, because you don't get a choice in being trans, I'm going to tell them to go fuck themselves and that they can have that conversation with someone else, because unless they're in my head or a mind reader and I am just meeting the first real psychic ever, they don't know what's in your head and they don't know what's in my head. They can't make that assertion. I don't know. I think you should be able to set boundaries with the people you have relationships in. And if those boundaries aren't respected, you should feel absolutely no guilt about, and it doesn't have to be a burned bridge, doesn't have to be like you never can talk to that person again, right? You can say, hey, look, clearly you don't respect my boundaries and you don't respect who I am. And I get it. We're in different places. But until you're able to do that, I think it's better that maybe we don't have a relationship with each other, and we can revisit that at another time in the future. There's a lot of ways I think you can firmly and clearly set your boundaries with someone with either of those goals in mind, either maintaining the relationship or not. So maybe it's worth thinking about what your goals are and trying to think of the best way to accomplish that.
Yeah. Well, most of the people I'm talking with are immediate family. I can't really, tell them to fuck off, for example. But no, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, okay. Well, just wasn't sure if either of you had some magical revelation about how to get around that particular conversational landmine. But
unfortunately, you can't strong arm people.
I know what's in my head. You can't tell me what's in my head, but you're going to tell me what's in my head anyway, even though you're wrong. Like, if anything, that just reinforces my belief that you are wrong when you tell me what's in my head and you're wrong about it.
Well, I wish you the best of luck on these conversations, Ashley. I know how difficult it can be engaging with the people who are supposed to support you and be there for you on any of these topics alone, but when it adds the invalidation of invalidating who you are, that makes it even more difficult. So yeah, best of luck with these conversations. I hope you I'll find a way to navigate them in a way that works for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me on. Have a good one.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for calling.
Bye, Ashley.